Police.
Developing tonight, there's a $21,000 reward for any information that would lead to an arrest in the killing of Mya Fuller.
The body of the 22-year-old was found in a wooded area in the southeastern part of Wilson County in August. WSMV's Tosin Fakile has new information on where police say she was last seen.
7 shots, not one panicked reaction, a repeated, deliberate act. 2 broken ribs, 2 shattered legs. Injuries a medical examiner would later use to reconstruct exactly how violent her final hour had been, long before any bullet was ever fired. It started with something so small, most people forget it happens. An argument, words, the kind of thing you're supposed to walk away from. She did. The people she argued with didn't. And somewhere in Nashville, while all of that was still unfolding, a gray Toyota Camry sat parked outside a nightclub. Doors locked. Exactly where its owner had left it. Nobody came back for it. Nobody moved it. It just sat there, in plain sight, while a family 2 counties away made phone call after phone call to a number that had stopped ringing back. 22 years old, a soccer stadium shift the day before, a message from someone she barely knew, and a decision, made hours in advance by 3 people she had no reason to be afraid of, that she would not be alive by the following Monday. This is the story of Mya Fuller and how an ordinary Saturday night got engineered into something else entirely. Before we go further, if this is your first time on Crime Horizon HQ, hit subscribe. Cases like this one, we tell every week. Mya grew up in Murfreesboro, a college town about half an hour outside Nashville. She was the kind of daughter people describe using the word sharp without hesitating. Her mother didn't just call her smart, she called her a genius, and meant every word of it. She worked. She showed up for her family. Nothing about her life was flashy, and that's sort of the point. She was building something ordinary, 1 week at a time, the way most 22-year-olds are. The last weekend of July, 2022, looked like every other weekend she'd had that summer. Friday, she spent time with family. Saturday, she clocked in for a shift at Geodis Park, the soccer stadium in Nashville. Clocked out, went home. Nothing about that day suggested anything was wrong. Nobody in her family knew they were watching her leave for one of the last times. To understand what happened to Mya, you have to rewind one day, to an argument that, on its own, meant almost nothing. Mya crossed paths with a woman named Tiana Tipton, 21, from Nashville. Words were exchanged. Nobody has ever laid out exactly what was said, and honestly, the specifics barely matter. Because it was the kind of disagreement that happens between strangers in every city, every weekend. No weapons. Nobody hurt. Just an argument that should have ended the moment both women walked away from it. For Mya, it did end there. She went home. She went to work the next day like nothing had happened. There's no indication she thought about Tiana Tipton again. For Tipton, something different happened. She carried that argument home with her, and somewhere between that night and the next afternoon, it stopped being an argument and became a plan. Here's where this case turns from a disagreement into something calculated. Tipton wanted to confront Mya, but there was a problem. Mya already knew her face. If Tipton approached her directly, Mya would see it coming. So Tipton turned to someone who could get close without raising any alarm at all. Her younger brother, Tyshawn Bowles, 20 years old. According to prosecutors, Bowles knew about the fight between his sister and Mya. He knew what his sister wanted, and with that knowledge, he searched social media until he found Mya's profile, a woman he had never met, and sent her a message. The message pointed to a party that night at Island Vibes, a nightclub on Antioch Pike in South Nashville. Think about how ordinary that invitation would have looked from where Mya was standing. A club is public, loud, full of people, cameras at the door, security inside. An invite from someone with no obvious connection to an argument that had nothing to do with him. At 22, messages like that come in constantly. Promoters, friends of friends, people you half know, inviting you to something happening that night. Saying yes wasn't reckless. It was completely normal. That's what makes this particular plan so hard to sit with. It didn't rely on Mya making a mistake. It only needed her to behave like any young woman would on a free Saturday night. She said yes. And this wasn't a plan built in a moment of panic. There was time in every part of it. Tipton had a full day to let the anger fade, and she didn't. Bowles had to find a stranger's profile, study it, write a message, and keep the conversation going long enough to get an answer. At any point, either one of them could have stopped. Neither did. There was a third person involved too. Lamyra Pipkins, 20, close with both Tipton and Bowles. When the night came, she wasn't on the sidelines. Picture Nashville that evening. The sun going down, the city lighting up for a Saturday night. Mya, fresh off a long shift, getting ready for what she believed would be a good end to her week. Across town, Tipton was still holding on to a grudge that was now a full day old. Pipkins was ready to back her up. And Bowles, the stranger who had baited the invitation, was waiting to see whether Mya would actually show. She got dressed. She drove toward Antioch Pike, toward the noise and the lights, expecting nothing more than a normal night out. She had no way of knowing that 3 people had spent the entire day preparing for her arrival. Island Vibes was loud and lit up, the kind of place that looks safe because it is full of people. Mya arrived a little after 11 that night, looking for a party. There wasn't one waiting for her, not really. At some point, she ended up outside, in the parking lot. That's where the night actually began. Tiana Tipton was waiting. She wasn't alone. Tipton came at Mya. So did Pipkins. 2 against 1, in a dark lot, away from the noise and the crowd inside. Mya fought. She didn't go down without resisting. A 22-year-old woman outnumbered and ambushed, fighting for her life, in a place she had believed she was welcome. But 2 attackers, coordinated hours in advance, against 1 person caught off guard, rarely ends in the victim's favor. By the time it was over, Mya's ribs were broken. Her leg was broken. What the medical examiner would later document told investigators exactly how violent those minutes had been. Then it escalated further. A trunk opened. Mya, injured and barely able to stand, was forced inside. The lid closed over her. Stop and sit with that for a second, because this is the moment everything shifts. That same morning, she had been home with her family. That afternoon, she had clocked out of a normal shift. That night, she had said yes to 1 invitation. Now she was locked in the dark, and the people responsible were climbing into the car above her. Then they started driving. They didn't leave her there and disappear. They got into the car and they drove. Out of Nashville, across the county line, into Wilson County. However long that drive lasted, Mya was alive for every mile of it. Locked in the dark, feeling the road change beneath her. No way to see where she was headed, and no way out. They eventually stopped on a quiet, undeveloped property off Trammell Lane near Lebanon. Empty land, no neighbors close enough to hear anything. They had taken her from a building full of strangers to a stretch of ground with almost nobody around for miles. The trunk opened again, and Tiana Tipton shot Mya 7 times. 7 separate shots. Not one panicked reaction, but a repeated, deliberate act. When it was finished, they left her there and drove back to Nashville, leaving behind a daughter, a friend, an entire life, abandoned in a county she had no reason to have ever set foot in. Back home, hours passed without a word from Mya. For a family used to hearing from her regularly, that silence became terrifying fast. She was reported missing. Then came a detail that made everything worse. Her gray Toyota Camry was found exactly where she had parked it outside Island Vibes. Untouched, still there. She never came back for it. The car was there. Mya wasn't. What followed were days that are almost impossible to describe from the outside. Phone calls that went nowhere. A search with no answers. A slow, sickening certainty that something had gone terribly wrong, with nothing yet to confirm it. On August 6, 2022, about a week after she was last seen, the answer finally came, and it was the worst version of what her family had feared. On that same property off Trammell Lane, human remains were discovered in a wooded area behind the development. The medical examiner confirmed what nobody wanted to hear. It was Mya. Cause of death, multiple gunshot wounds. Her injuries told the rest of the story on their own. The broken ribs, the broken leg, evidence of a beating that had happened well before she was ever placed in that trunk. None of it had been fast. None of it had been merciful. Knowing how Mya died was one problem. Proving who was responsible was an entirely different one. Whoever did this had been careful, moving her body across county lines, away from any witnesses, into a location built to hide what had happened. Investigators were now working a case that stretched across multiple jurisdictions, trying to reconstruct a timeline that had been deliberately scattered. The investigation moved slowly at first. Detectives identified several people of interest and worked through leads, some technological, some old-fashioned legwork, talking to people who might know something. Mya's presence at Island Vibes became a central point in the timeline, supported by more than just her abandoned car. Investigators worked with nearby businesses and anyone who might have seen something that night. For months, the biggest questions stayed unanswered. Who had approached her? Who she had left with? Who was ultimately responsible? Then, in January of the following year, a real breakthrough. Search warrants were issued for multiple suspects. Surveillance evidence and other material had given investigators enough to move forward, and the case that had stalled for months finally started picking up speed. That trail led to 3 people, a brother and sister, and one close associate, Tiana Tipton, Tyshawn Bowles, Lamyra Pipkins. All 3 were arrested and charged. For the first time in nearly a year, Mya's family finally had names attached to what happened to their daughter. But an arrest is not the same as an ending. It was only the start of a much longer process. Tipton and Bowles were charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. Pipkins was charged with first-degree murder committed during a kidnapping, along with kidnapping. All 3 were held without bond. Justice, in this case, did not arrive all at once. It came in 3 separate pieces, spread out across nearly a year, and each one reopened the wound for Mya's family. The first piece came in March of 2025. Tipton was days from trial, a jury nearly seated, when she pleaded guilty to every charge against her. First-degree murder, kidnapping, abuse of a corpse. She was sentenced to life in prison. The woman who, according to the case laid out by prosecutors, forced Mya into that trunk and fired 7 shots, would not be free again. The second piece landed that October, and it landed very differently. Bowles, the brother who found Mya's profile and sent the message that started everything, did not plead guilty to murder. He pleaded to a lesser charge, facilitation of especially aggravated kidnapping, and received 12 years, with the possibility of release after serving only part of that sentence. In court, more details came out. Bowles admitted he was present. He admitted he watched the assault happen. He admitted hearing his sister give the order to open the trunk. But he claimed he never actually saw Mya placed inside the vehicle, saying he followed behind and lost sight of the car in the dark. The legal system drew a distinction between orchestrating a night and pulling a trigger. For Mya's family, that distinction offered very little comfort. The man who set the entire plan into motion, without whom none of it happens, received the lightest sentence of the 3. The final piece came in March of 2026. Pipkins held out the longest, her trial the last one still scheduled. On the morning jury selection was set to begin, she pleaded guilty to facilitation of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 years. 3 guilty pleas, 3 different measures of accountability for one young woman's life. Look at how those sentences actually landed. The woman who pulled the trigger got life. The one who helped beat Mya to the ground got 20 years. And the person who quietly set the entire night in motion, who searched for a stranger online and sent the message that pulled her out that door, walked away with the lightest punishment of all. A closed case is not the same thing as a resolved one. No sentence answers the question Mya's family has had to carry every day since. Why? Why does an argument, the kind most people forget by the following weekend, end with a young woman shot 7 times and left in an empty field? How do 3 people, none of them older than 21, look at someone who never touched them and choose, one deliberate step at a time, to take everything from her? Mya wasn't a headline. She was 22, a daughter her mother called a genius, kind, hardworking, a young woman who had every reason to expect a long life in front of her, and lost it over something that should have meant nothing at all.
Thank each of y'all for being here today. Today, we are here to honor Mya Fuller. Mya was a young and vibrant young woman who had her whole life ahead of her. We are here to let the individual or individuals that are responsible for her death to know that we're going to find you. Justice will be served for Mya and her family. We are here asking for the public's help for information that you may know, but until now have been hesitant to disclose. Our detectives have identified several persons of interest through the course of the investigation. We are continuing to pursue those leads very actively. A short timeline of events. On July 29th, Mya was last seen in Murfreesboro, Tennessee by her family members. July 30th, Mya worked an event at the Nashville Soccer Club at Geodis Park in Nashville. Mya's last known location was a party located at Island Vibes nightclub on Antioch Pike, close to Harding Place, during the late night hours of July 30th and the early morning hours of July 31st. Mya was wearing jeans, a shirt, and bright pink Puma tennis shoes. Mya's dark gray 2020 Toyota Camry was located in a parking lot close to the Island Vibes nightclub. August 6th, Mya's body was located in a wooded area on Trammell Lane in the southeastern portion of Wilson County. The Wilson County Sheriff's Office continues to stand with the Fuller family. We will not rest until the person or persons responsible for her murder are identified and prosecuted. August 16th, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office released a press release and issued a reward of up to $1,000 by the Wilson County Sheriff's Office for anyone with information that leads to the successful identification and prosecution of the persons or persons responsible. Today, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office will be increasing that reward from $1,000 to up to $5,000 for information that will lead to the identification of the person responsible. Currently, detectives with the Wilson County Sheriff's Criminal Investigation Division continue to investigate these circumstances surrounding the murder of Mya. The investigation is very active at this time, and the Sheriff's Office requests that anyone with any information pertaining to Mya Fuller's murder to contact the Wilson County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigation Division.
If there's a lesson in Mya's story, it isn't complicated, and it isn't comfortable either. The invitation that ended her life didn't look dangerous. It looked like a normal Saturday night, sent by someone who seemed harmless enough. That's exactly what made it work. Be careful who you trust on the other end of a message. Be careful which invitations you accept from people you barely know. And when there's tension with someone you're not close to, walk away from it completely, because you never really know how far another person is willing to go. Mya's life was taken from her. Her name doesn't have to disappear along with it. If this case stayed with you, take a moment to remember her. Mya Fuller, 22, a daughter, a friend, someone who deserved so much more time than she got. If you want more cases covered with the same care, subscribe to Crime Horizon HQ and let us know in the comments what you think about how these sentences turned out. Rest in peace, Mya Fuller.